Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here, your source for gaming, tech, emulation, and open source news. Let's get started. Alright, to kick things off, we're talking about the early success of the Nintendo Switch 2, and there's been some analysis completed, and already they're forecasting some pretty heavy-hitting numbers. All of this data and analysis is reportedly coming from Ampere Analysis, and GamesIndustry.biz has a whole lot of information, more than we're covering, and I recommend checking out this article. And if you're interested in it and wanted to learn more about it, like everything we talk about, links are in the description below right at the bottom. And they say here the data firm predicts that the console will move 32.2 million units next year, 51.2 million units by 2027, and a whopping 104.3 million units by the end of the decade, which is 2030. Now, some people may look at that 104 million number and wonder how that does for the Switch 2. Does it make the Switch 2 the best-selling console of all time? And the answer is no, not even close. It's not even in the top 5. So if we take a look at the PlayStation 2 right now, that's number 1 at about 160 million units sold. And that number might change based on how Sony is feeling, especially if the Switch gets closer to it. So the DS is in second place with 154.02 million units sold. The Nintendo Switch, which is still currently on sale, is at 152.12 million units sold, and it hasn't even been out for 10 years yet. However, and this is a real big however, if you take a look at the Nintendo Switch, it's been out for about 8 years. After 8 years, it sold 152.12 million units. With the Switch 2 in that number prediction, 104 million units after 5 years. That means the Switch 2 is selling faster than the existing Nintendo Switch. If that's true, and if that holds up, then yeah, the Switch 2 could potentially become the best-selling console ever. It's worth noting, though, that we're still extremely early on in the Switch 2's life cycle. It literally just released. So I think it's way too early to be able to tell any of this stuff. We're going to need data over a couple of years to see how things are going. And I think that will dictate how the Switch 2 does. Interestingly, it doesn't seem that the price currently is a factor in any of this. It doesn't seem that price that a lot of people, myself included, are not happy with, are playing into the Switch 2's overall success. And interestingly here, to strengthen the case of success for the Switch 2, Doug Bowser has stated Nintendo thinks it can meet Switch 2 demand in the US through 2025. And that's great for people who are interested in a Switch 2, but maybe bad for people trying to scalp a Switch 2. So here's the quote from Doug Bowser. It's up on VGC. "We already have a steady supply of manufacturing that will be coming in, and we believe we'll be able to meet that demand all the way through the summer, through Father's Day, and then into the holiday period also." And that is really good for the Nintendo Switch 2 and Nintendo. So overall here, I think there's 3 things to consider. Number 1, take all of this with a big grain of salt, or a tiny grain of salt. This is still very early analysis. The Switch 2 just dropped, and we're going to have to wait and see if the Switch 2 can continue on with sales momentum. Number 2, the Switch 2 could become potentially the best-selling console of all time if these numbers hold up and if momentum continues year over year. Again, that coincides with point number 1. And point number 3 here, it seems that Nintendo can price the Switch 2 at whatever they want. They can price their stuff at whatever they want, and people are going to buy it. But I don't know here. Let me know your thoughts about this one in the comments below, and maybe I should have put my fingers down in a different order, especially with point number 3. Who knows? Interestingly here, this is a fun fact. 56% of Steam Deck owners also use a Nintendo Switch. I'm in that 56%. And only 1.3% of Switch owners consider the Steam Deck to be their primary console device. I am in that 1.3% also. I've got a Steam Deck, and I consider it to be my primary console. I use that thing more than pretty much everything. And speaking about fun facts, next up we're still talking about the Switch 2 and this story that's making its way around the internet. So the title of it is "Purchasing a Switch 2 Saved My Life." So at a very high level here, the person who purchased the Switch 2 is also a diabetic. And I guess when they bought the Switch 2, they bought a Coke with it, or I don't know, maybe they got a Coke for free here because they say Walmart sent a Coke with my purchase. I'm assuming that means they bought the Coke. Anyways, I guess the next day their blood sugars were super low and they relied on that Coke that they bought with the Switch 2 in order to save their life. And that's the story. But let me know your thoughts about that story in the comments below. Do you think the story is made up? Do you think it's real? And is it one of the better stories about the launch of the Switch 2 that you've heard? In my books, I think this is one that may take the cake here. Maybe not. Let me know if you've got a better story in the comments below. I'm going to try to keep it together while reading this one because, well, it's something. Once in a lifetime experience. I went to the midnight launch, West Coast, and over the course of about 2.5 hours, a guy crapped his pants, and the girl next to him started crying from the smell. The police were called, not because of the poop. Someone showed up with a live goat, and the police were fine with it. And the automatic doors at Best Buy broke. I don't even know if this is made up. Now, I don't know about you, but I'd be wondering how the rest of that story went. And I think this person here asked the exact same question that I would. Did the crap pants guy just wait it out and then go and claim his Switch 2 with the raw turd in his pants? Or maybe he went home. I have no idea. Next up, we're still talking about Nintendo Switch 2 stuff, but no turds this time. We're talking about differences in loading times. And there have been some videos popping up on YouTube comparing the internal system memory versus the game card loading times versus the micro SD card loading times. And surprisingly here, the micro SD is doing fairly well. It's a few seconds slower than the internal memory, and the game card here is close to 10 seconds slower than the internal memory. Now, it's worth pointing out here, this is just one test. It's just for Mario Kart World, and we're going to have to wait and see moving forward to see if other games follow the same logic. But I would say I'm not surprised seeing that the internal memory is the fastest, but I am surprised at the margin between internal memory and the game card. I mean, compared to the Switch 1 loading times are a lot tighter. They're a lot closer across the board. This test was done in multiple places, including Digital Foundry, and I'll try to get to the test results right here. But if you take a look at Breath of the Wild, the internal was 18 seconds. The cartridge was 2 seconds slower, not even 2 seconds, around 20 seconds. And the micro SD was kind of in between at 19 and 20 seconds. So I would say overall, there's a big difference now between internal and that game card. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, this introduces even more controversy surrounding the whole game card, game key card situation on the Switch. I mean, Nintendo first-party titles are all on that game card. At least that's what they're saying right now. And it seems as if you're punished for buying that game card and using the game card in terms of loading times. I mean, it's 8 seconds slower, over 8 seconds slower for using the game card. I don't want to say it's an all-digital future, but it really seems that the all-digital way is the more convenient way to go for the Nintendo Switch 2. But I guess we'll have to wait and see if firmware updates tighten up the loading time difference or what goes on here. But it's kind of crazy that game key cards don't contain the game, and you need the game key card in the system in order to play the game. And game cards are slow loading. I don't know if all games will be like this or what. But if this is the case across the board, there's, in my opinion, almost no incentive to buy that game card aside from resale. And speaking about Mario Kart, next up we're talking about Mario Kart 64 on the Sega Dreamcast. I am not joking with you. So we've talked about ports of Grand Theft Auto for the Sega Dreamcast, and this is something entirely different. So here is the tweet. Finally, time for the big announcement everyone has been begging and waiting for. Here's a very early direct hardware capture of Mario Kart 64 running on the Sega Dreamcast. Now, I find this super fascinating, and they go on to say here, this game was literally just barely decompiled the other day with a codebase that is still quite married to the Nintendo 64 platform. But this didn't stop J.N. Martin, the dark coding wizard who brought us a dynamically lit and bump-mapped Doom 64 and Wipeout, running at 100 frames per second on the Dreamcast. What you're seeing is the insane progress made by one man in just 3 weeks. As is to be expected, there are all kinds of visual glitches and rendering artifacts. The frame rate is all over the place, and there's no audio yet, which is totally typical of any ambitious Dreamcast port in the early stages. And if you're interested in this one and wanted to learn more about it, again, like everything we talk about, links are in the description below at the bottom. It's just fascinating. I mean, seeing Mario Kart 64 running on the Dreamcast. It's still got a ways to go here. The video is up over on Twitter, over 3 minutes worth of video. And I'm very curious to see where this project ends up going and how good it ends up looking on the Dreamcast. And speaking about gameplay, next up we're talking about Duke Nukem D-Day on the PlayStation 2. If you're not familiar with this game, I really don't blame you because it was never launched on the PlayStation 2. This was a prototype that was cancelled and has been recently leaked. So Duke Nukem D-Day on the PlayStation 2 was being developed by N-Space, where you traveled back in time to World War II, and this prototype includes quite a bit of stuff. There's 12 different levels. Things aren't perfect here, but the game seems to have been pretty far along given the fact that there are 12 levels, and from my understanding, this thing has been preserved up on the Internet Archive. Next up, we're talking about one of my favorite Linux distributions, and that's Linux Mint. Now, for the record, I've got many favorite Linux distributions. Linux Mint is one of them, though, and they just released their May monthly newsletter. Taking a look, there's a brand new feature here that I think some people may be excited about, and that's with Linux Mint 22.2. They're introducing FingWit, which is a brand new fingerprint configuration tool. So FingWit detects if your computer has a fingerprint reader and lets you record your fingerprints. It then configures your system to use fingerprint authentication for the login screen, the screensaver, admin apps, and sudo or subscribe to Mr. Sujano, depending on how you wanted to pronounce that, commands. And this to me is pretty cool. And the best part about it is it's not limited to Linux Mint. This is up on GitHub if you wanted to use it for a different distro. So according to the FingWit GitHub, the latest release and the only release was 3 days ago, and it's version 1.0.1. So in my opinion, this is pretty fresh. And speaking about fresh, next up we're talking about Doom: The Dark Ages, the physical release of the game. And it's being reported here that on PlayStation 5, Doom: The Dark Ages requires a full game download. So the physical version of the disc does not contain the game on it. It functions, I would argue, very similar to something like a game keycard. If you haven't checked out Does It Play before, I recommend giving the website a look. I mean, it's a free resource with a ton of very good information. It'll let you know if a game has the full thing on the disc or the cartridge, if it requires an online connection, and if it can be played offline. And taking a look at Doom: The Dark Ages here, this is super interesting. Only 85 megabytes are on the disc. That is, maybe interesting is the wrong word. I would say maybe that's very unfortunate. The disc really doesn't serve a purpose in my opinion. For the Xbox Series X version of this game, I would say things are different, but not necessarily better. So it's being reported that only 300 megabytes are on the disc, and upon starting the game after installing this stub, the game will take you to a screen with 3 versions to choose for downloading. I don't even know why you'd buy a physical version of the game if this is the case. And last up here, we're talking about Bento, which is a Steam Deck in a keyboard. So someone here seems to have been very ambitious and crammed an entire Steam Deck into just a keyboard. Overall, I'd say this project is pretty cool. I mean, it's basically a PC crammed inside of a keyboard. The Steam Deck can be used as a PC. I've done it. Either way here, this is a really neat project. The developer of this one seems to be working on even more here, like integrating a mouse as well. So it's just all in one, ready to go, ready to just be plugged in and used. They say that there are some overall flaws in the design that they need to fix, but this is the first working version. The whole project has been a game of constraint and optimization. Empty space on the right side is the Bento design, and that's where they put the overall adapter, I believe, right there. And then they say the printer is too small, so that it is a split body, and no mouse but modules are in the works. Let me know your thoughts about this project. But anyways, that is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and no fluff. We talked about a bunch today. Feel free to discuss anything we talked about in the comments below. If you like this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button. Check out my other videos. Don't tempt fate. Save your state.